Record. Hey, Jarvis. Okay, let's see. All right, so I'm just going to kind of narrate as I go along here. I have this project that I'm already working on called Thank You. So I've already made a little bit of progress on this project, and now I'm going to pop it up in code. And I've mostly been working on it as I'm going to mute you, Jarvis. If you have a question or want to join in, just ping me, okay? And that way we can just keep the background noise down. Okay, great. So here we go. We have some code right here, and I have to figure out actually how to run this in the simulator because so far I have been running it. I'm gonna see if I can hide the video panel. Disable, hide video panel. There we go. So far I've been running it on my actual phone. So this is all using Expo. So I'm gonna see if I can get some Expo help here on how to run it in the simulator. Let's see. Expo, build iOS, build Android, build web. There's probably a run. iOS opens your app in an Expo simulator. So let's try that. Expo iOS. Okay, let's see what happens there. Opening iOS simulator. So I already have Xcode installed on my Mac. That's why this just works without any extra steps. And if you don't know what Expo is a product that makes that pre-builds React Native into an app that is installable into a simulator or onto a phone directly. And it has a bunch of native frameworks already installed, so you can just ship your JavaScript straight on to the device. Okay, it looks like we also need to Expo or npm start here. And yeah, so you can ship stuff straight onto the device without having to do an Xcode build or have an Xcode project at all. And then it also makes deployment through the App Store easy, just for with the trade-off that, okay, let's see if we can get what's going on here. Expo land, maybe if we go launch, let's see, go back to Expo home. See if there's anything going on here. Maybe this one. Sweet, it's working. I totally forgot what I was saying, but it's pulling down JavaScript over the air right now onto the simulator. And oh yeah, when you publish, oh yeah, so the trade-off is that you can only use any native libraries that Expo has bundled or pre-made. So that does limit the abilities, the native abilities that are possible in an Expo app. So you can break out into an Expo unmanaged project, but it's so simple to use Expo that I just keep doing it here. All right, so let's see what we've got. So this app that I'm working on, the idea is that it's for keeping track of thanks. When you feel thankful to people, just write them down here so that you can remember at a later time to give those thanks, just to help people's lives feel better. So here's what we have on the main screen, the app title. And by the way, I'm not a designer, in case you thought I was. And it looks like we got some styling to do here. I'm using the UI framework React Native UI Kitten, I believe, because I like the way it looks and it supports dark mode. So let's go see what we've got. Inside of app, here at the top, there's the thank you title. So let's try adjusting this, seeing what happens if I save. Okay, so we need to turn on hot reloading here. If we hit Command R, let's see. Oh, you know what? I'm not running my buckle script either. So let's go ahead and run buckle script here. npm run build. Now buckle script is watching. We could see any errors if they come up there. So here we save the file. Oh, and it does auto reload. It is live reloading. So it is not hot reloading. In fact, I believe hot reloading does not work with the Reason React compiled code or with function components. You can see I'm using all function components here. So if I were to go in and Command D, I believe, brings up the Expo window here. If I come in and I say disable live reload and then enable hot reloading, I think it's going to break, but let's just see. Yeah, it breaks. So let's just leave that off for now. I'm hoping that gets fixed in a future release. So we're going to disable hot reloading and enable live reload. So live reload will change whenever I edit the file. So, okay, here we go. So there's the thank you title up top. And, I kind of wonder if you can put a shadow. Do you know if you could put a shadow on text? Let's see if you can. So this is the logo. Okay, so here I've got style for the logo is ss dot hash logo, which is ss is my styles, and we've opened the style module here, creating a style sheet, and the logo has its style right here. And I've also got fancy ligatures on these fonts, so you can see that's actually just a dot and then a dash and then a caret. Which it does funny stuff too. So let's go ahead and see if we can add in a shadow or a drop shadow maybe. Shadow color. Shadow color equals black. Let's try that. Does that work? Yeah, it seems to. Shadow offset equals, and what's the type of shadow offset going to be? Oh, maybe like 12 dp for display pixels. See if I can remember where the keys on my keyboard are. Does that work? It's not going to work because it wants a React Native.style.offset. Let's see. We probably can't command click on any of these things because these are all JSX. But if we come inside of style sheet, maybe we could go to style right here and we could look for offset. Offset. vs.obj external offset. Height and width, and they're two floats, and that returns an offset. Okay, so let's see if we can just pass that in right there. So that's going to be offset. Offset height is 12, and width is 12. How about that? I don't know. Do you see a shadow in there? I don't. Shadow offset, shadow opacity. Maybe we should try 1. See if that affects anything. Oh, there we go. So let's see shadow. Maybe there's a shadow blur or a shadow spread, shadow radius. What if we set that to 12? And I think we have to use floats for all these things. That's why you see me putting a dot afterward. So that's pretty cool. Let's see if we can spread it out some more and then offset it less. Let's only offset at height, not any width. That's a funny way to write that out. I wouldn't have called that width. There we go. Now we've given it a little bit of shadow behind the thank you. And let's set the opacity to 0.5 instead of to 1. There we go. Hey, that's looking pretty good. All right. Now let's go down to the input field. This is where it's going to start to get painful because I have wrapped these inputs myself, which you can see inside of UI kitten right here. You need to run BSP first. Let's see. Reload window. The language server. I've been working on the language server, so I'm running a custom one here. I might have some bugs going on, but okay. So here, this file is where I've been writing external wrappers for UI kitten, and I may have made some mistakes. So let's see if it's possible to customize the style for the main input. So you can see that the main input style is right here. I gave it a min height of 64. What if we gave it something crazy like border? Can we do that? Border color, border color equals red, and border width is equal to 12. Something super crazy like that. Is it gonna, hey, it's working. That's great. So I don't know what the width 12 is. That didn't really pan out well. But I think it looks like the border width is maybe applying to the entire input instead of just the inner input. So let's go to the documentation for React Native UI Kitten, and see what's available here. We're going to go to the documentation, and we're going to go to components, and let's go to, there should be an input here somewhere. Checkbox, toggle, input. And we're going to go over to the API. And you can see that we have a text style, a caption style, a label style. And is there an input style? Size, status. This documentation also hasn't always been correct. There have been cases when I try to pass attributes in to the UI and they just don't work, which is not great. In fact, they throw errors. Text input props right there. Oh yeah, so this means this takes all text input props. A little buggy sometimes, like that border. Okay, so what I actually was hoping to do here is maybe make the input full width, or we could give some padding to the outside here. So let's take off those tests that we did before. So there's our input. I kind of like having it full width. I think that's interesting, but it doesn't really look like an input that way. So let's actually go to the container and give it a little bit of padding. Padding 24px, or actually 24dp, because that's what we've got here. 24.dp. Here we go. Okay, so that does look like an input, right? Okay. Now I'm going to pause the share for a moment because my daughter is making sounds and she should be asleep. So I'm going to pause. And I'm going to pause the recording. All right, I'm back again. So here we go. Let's take this code. Okay, so this is looking fine to me. I would like to give a little more spacing between the input and the text, but maybe I will just leave that be for now. The thing that I'm really concerned about is this button, which is not looking good. The UI kitten button says that it should be able to have all these different attributes passed to it, and in reality, they aren't doing anything, or rather, they're throwing an error. So let's just double check that. If we go down to button, we should have all these different styles available, and the state should be by default filled. Now, it could be that it's because I'm on the dark interface, so let's go try out the light interface. Let's see what happens. Application provider.light. No, that's still not filled. So let's go ahead and see what's going on there. Ideally, we should be able to just pass. Well, we shouldn't have to pass anything in to fix that. So input button right here. Button status is primary. So if we just remove the status entirely, we should just have a button that looks like that. And we don't at all have that. So the API status string determines the component can be primary, success, info, warning, danger, or white. There's the size, there's the children, text style, icon, appearance. Determines the appearance of the component can be filled, outline, or ghost. So it says default is filled. If we just pass in outline, let's try that out. Appearance. Oh, we don't have that on there. Let's go to UI kitten where I have the wrapping code. Let's go to button, and appearance is there. It says it's a string, filled, outline, ghost equal question mark. So that should be showing up. React, oh, you know what? Look at that. I didn't bind it to a button, I bound it to text. That makes me feel really silly. Look at that. That is beautiful now. Here I was complaining about React UI Kitten, and I shouldn't have done that. So the question is, what do I do with that save button? Boy, sometimes I wish I were a designer, you know? So let's just try putting it down and to the right or something. I don't know. View, and let's put that button inside of a view, and then style is going to be SS ##. Oops. Button container. And that's going to say save, sure. And then up here inside of the styles, let's throw in a button container and style. And let's say it's a flex. It actually flexes. So that means it's going to expand to fill its parent space. And then I'm also going to add a display. Display. Can I do that? No. Flex justify content. Oh, we don't need to set display flex because it's everything in React Native is automatically display flex. So we're going to say align content equals right, I believe. And then we'll throw in that. Does that not work? We can't do align content equals right. Align content. No, we should be able to do right, I think. What is our compiler error? Flex end, flex start. Ah, duh. Flex end. Thank you, compiler. That's very nice. Thank you for all that help. Ooh, wow. We just really nuked that, didn't we? Because it should be flex. I don't want it to actually flex all the way. I just want it to be width 100%, I think. So maybe we can do that this way. Width equals 100 PCT. 100.pct. Because everything's got to be dot. Hey, so the button container is 100% width, but the button itself, align content flex end. So the button itself, I don't know. Should it be over to the right or should it just be full? Maybe we should just let it be full. But we should definitely give it some margin top. Margin top equals 24 dp. Let's try that. And I gotta put a dot in there. dp. You know, this font makes this look kind of funny. I wonder, maybe we should try one of my other fonts. Text editor. I'm gonna go down. I really like the one. I've always liked Ubuntu Mono. And I have a special hack of it right now with ligatures, because I also like ligatures. Ubuntu Mono ligatures, but I also like dank mono. It just doesn't look as good in a bold variety because it doesn't have a native bold. But it doesn't have like a hand hinted bold, but let's keep this going for now because I like the way this looks. I'm always back to dank mono. Alrighty. So maybe someday I'll get a designer to look at this. Right now, I guess it's good enough, right? So here, this should be a multi-line input as well. Yeah, so we can write a whole bunch of stuff. That's great. Okay, so let's go ahead and make it so that when we make it so the data actually happens. What I'd like to do is when you write something that's worth a thank you, first of all, I'd like to have stats at the top that shows you how many thank yous you've done ever, you've recorded. And then here, when you write a thank you and hit save, I want it to put that thank you in the memory and then show a little status beneath that says saved, add another or something like that. And it'll reset this content. So first thing we got to do, I actually have already implemented the store for this. And let's see if it's still good enough. So storage. Okay, so we have a list of people and a list of thanks. So this was, I had a different data model for this before. I'm actually going to remove the list of people right now and add that in later if we want it to come later. So I'm going to get rid of the people and just have a list of thanks, okay? And let's go down to, okay, so that's the actual store. And then I have a little database, a little DB, local DB that's implemented here, because really this is just an in-memory data structure that I serialize to a file on the phone's hard drive, and then I read it back up again when the app launches. And I haven't tested it. I don't know if it works, so we're going to figure that out. But we don't need people anymore. And we can add those things later if we want. We don't need to make people. I'm going to comment out that code. But we do need to create thanks, and we need to add thanks. Let's see. Fields are explicit. So is there anything else we want to put on the state? Because right now it only has people. This app wants to let you track people. Maybe we track how many you've added today. Let's just leave it as it is right now. I had to take a drink of water. All right. And the thanks create is not going to have a for person on it anymore, because I think what we want to do is add the person at a later time, because I want to have it so that you get reminded about a thanks. And maybe we just make that person ID optional, or the person name. Person ID. Let's make that an option. And an optioned person ID should be a fragment. Oh, this isn't a type. Okay, so person ID and person name. Let's have both of those options in there for when we want to use them. Fragment dot for person name. And this fragment is going to be a thanks create. So for person ID string, option string, for person name, it's going to be an option of string. So that way, at a later time, when we remind the user to send thanks to someone, we can ask them for the person's name, or say like, hey, you've already thanked these people. Is it one of these people? If not, pick someone from your contacts or something like that. So we can start to build up a list of people that they thank, so that next time they want to thank that person, we don't have to prompt and say, hey, who are you going to send this to? We may not need these fields. In fact, so write something where I say thank you. You know what? Simplicity's sake, I know I'm wavering back and forth, but for simplicity's sake, let's just take them out right now. Can add it in later. Okay, new thanks. Now this is violating the shape for thanks, which are defined inside of types, I think. Types, thanks, person ID, we're gonna get that off. Description, date, and ID. Okay, so there's our new data model. And the state is upset because we only have one field on state anyway, which is thanks, and I'm spreading. And it's saying, hey, that's not very performant. So there's our new state. And when we do add something else to the state, the compiler will tell us, so I don't have to worry about overwriting data there. Okay, so what we can do here is we can fill a bunch of stuff out, and then when we hit save, we'll just do add thanks. Okay, I'm going to pause the share again. All right, we're back again. And here we go. Okay, so yeah, when they write something in, we will go ahead and call add thanks. We'll pop something on the screen that says that they've added thanks. And then what we need to do is here in our database, let's add another one called get thanks count. And that's going to just return a promise of an int. Oops. Here we go. And as you can see here, we get the state from the storage. Let state equals storage dot get state. And the first thing we need to do is load the storage. So inside of each of these functions, we actually, what you see here is let %p. Now this is using a PPX, or a language extension, that allows me to do, don't get scared, monadic binding, have some sugar for monadic binding syntax. So there's a module inside of base. I made a module called base, and I made a module inside here called p. And I defined the function that the language extension should call when it encounters, when the compiler encounters it. So what you could see is that right here, it's just calling an and then on the promise. So what it's going to do, it's going to come in here and say, go ahead and call loaded. And then whatever the result of the loaded is, I'm going to take that result and bind it to this value here. And everything that comes after, I'll treat it as if it were a callback. That's actually literally what it does, is it does a syntax transform on your code during the compilation step, where it takes everything that comes after this let and it drops it in a callback. So just It's literally just syntax sugar. That's nice on the eyes. Okay, so what we do is first we make sure the state is loaded, and then we get the state, and then from the state we can count the number of thanks because there's a field on the state called thanks. So we can say let count equals state.thanks into list.count or list.length. And then it's saying, hey, you need to return a promise. So that's where we can say resolved, which is part of base, the count. There we go. So base has resolved in it, which takes whatever it is and turns it into a promise. This let %p means that I have to return a promise at the end of my function. So resolved count. Okay, so now I have a function that when called returns a promise of an int. So let's do, for the very first thing let's do is put the stats on, above near thank you. And actually let's turn dark mode back on again too, because I liked that. So inside of app, we're going to go dark mode. There we are. Let's add some text right under thank you. Now let's see, are there any pre-done styles for text that we can use? Maybe we could use C1 caption or an S2 subtitle. Those look nice. And maybe I could use, that seems fine. So appearance, category, S2, subtitle. So category, I believe I already have bound in here. So inside of here, we could say text, and then let's throw in some other text, and it's going to be a category, I believe it was. Category. Is that right? Category equals SS ##. Oh no, not SS, the S2. There we go. Text, and now it's complaining because I need to pass children in. So I'm going to say the children are the string let's get the number of thanks. So here we can do an expression, and we can get the number of thanks. So thanks count, and as a string, so that's going to be an integer, and we can say string of int, and then we can pass that to thanks recorded so far. Right now it's having a problem because I don't have thanks count available, and that's because I haven't loaded it from my store. So here's where the first time we get to use some React hooks in here. So let's say let thanks count and set thanks count equal use state. Now use state I've defined inside of base. Use state right here. So use state is going to go ahead and take an initial value, and it'll give you back the state and a setter. So use state, now that's a custom function I wrote for this app. It's not how Reason, like you'll notice that I had to wrap Reason React's API, which is a little bit more low level. So use state, by default, we're going to say that the user has 0 stories, and it wants a function. Oh, you know what? I wonder if this is base.useState. No, that's using React's useState because I have React open. So I'm going to say, just go ahead and use base.useState there. And instead of passing it a function, I'm going to pass it the value 0. So now thanks count is going to be an int, and set thanks count takes an int and returns unit. So the next thing we're going to do is say let, or not let, but we're going to say base.onMount. And this is going to take a function. Now on mount, we're going to go ahead and use our local DB, and we're going to say get thanks count, okay? And that doesn't take any arguments at all. And I'm going to do my old let %, if I can find % of my keyboard, let %p count equals that. So now count will be an integer, and I can say set thanks count. And then I'll just say resolved, because I have to return a promise at the end of this function. And that should work. Oh, unbound module P. Do I not have base open in here? Open React, Open base. Got to do that. There we go. So now it's going to say, oh, it has an expression of type string, because now we have to pass it into react.string, which is going to turn a string into a renderable element. Okay, well, let's see what happens. 0 thanks recorded so far. That's great. Okay, so I wonder why there's so much space between thank you and 0 thanks recorded so far. Thank you, 0 thanks recorded so far, text. Wonder what's going on there. And then there's the input. And then there's the view for the button. So maybe we should go look at what styles the container has and what styles the category has, right? I think I keep getting weird states because I'm running buckle script in 2 places. So I'm going to go into my reason language server. And oh, I already have auto rebuild disabled. I wonder why I keep getting that warning. Okay. So the container tries to align all the items to the center. And the logo is position absolute. So that's why we have everything shoved to the center like that. Let's do something different. Let's see what's going to be the right way to lay this out. We'll probably want this thanks recorded so far close to the bottom of the window. I mean, the input close to the bottom of the window, the thanks in the middle, and the thank you at the top. So let's go ahead and throw 3 views in here. And the top one will have the logo, view, and the middle one will be the stats, view, boop, and then the bottom one will be the input area. The form, I guess you might say. Let's save that, see what happens. Wow, everything just gets totally out of place. So this thank you. Let's take off all of this stuff, except for the shadow. Okay, that's starting to look better. So now, instead of justifying the content to the center, let's say justify content is space between, space around. Hey, that looks pretty good, right? I think so. And then let's make sure that the padding at the top, padding top is 48. I don't know, something like that. We're going to have to figure out how it looks on different screens eventually. Maybe it's going to be better. Okay, padding top, padding bottom. Let's just give it like 100 pixels at the top and bottom. 100 digital display pixels. All right, so that's looking a little better. Maybe 100 at the bottom is a little bit excessive. Maybe more like 50. I don't want it to look ugly, but I do want to get it out of the way of, some phones have like the iPhone X have this touch bar at the bottom, and that can be awkward to get in the way of. So maybe we do like, I want to get really close to that so that it doesn't look awkward on other screens. Okay, that looks good. That looks good to me. Now, write something more. Thank you. So this button container is supposed to be width 100%, margin top 24. Now the button itself is probably not width 100%. So what if we just took off that container entirely and just named this submit button? Okay, so down here you'll see it's not going to compile because button container isn't a thing anymore. Submit button is though. And instead of putting it on the view, let's put it on the button. Woo! Put it on the button. Get rid of the view that wraps it. Wow, that is totally not what I was thinking would happen. What? Oh, man. Okay. So what about this view? Wraps the input, and it wraps the button. So instead of width 100%, maybe we should say button is... Wow, that's surprising. So, wow. Okay. Okay. Well, you know what? It works, so I'm not going to question it now. Okay. So that button, it's purple. We happy with that? I guess so. Okay. So now we can write some stuff. And if we write, it moves upward, which is great. And I'm happy with this. This is pretty cool. Okay, so let's do the thing now where we actually write something and it saves the thanks. So let's make an object. See how I have, okay, my styles, and then right here, let's make an object called actions. Okay, so I want to have my hooks, my actions, my side effects, and then my DOM. That's kind of how I like to organize it. So let actions equal, and then let's have it be a JS object because that can take a dynamic shape without a described type. So my action for, I'm going to have an action called save thanks, okay? And that is going to take an event in that I'm going to ignore, and it's going to do something with it. And so that thing that it's going to do is call, okay, one thing we're going to do is say let saved and set saved to equal use state, which is now from, is use state from base now? Probably not, because it's overriding base. No, it is from base. Since I opened base after React, we're using base's use state. Okay, so I don't need to qualify it with base up there anymore, but maybe I will for consistency's sake and clarity. So by default, so a Boolean only has 2 states, and we actually need 3 states to represent whether it's saved or not, because there's saved, there's unsaved, and then there's haven't attempted to save. Since we're just saving into memory, and I know that we're just saving into memory, maybe we'll just use a Boolean, and if saved is false, we'll hide it, and if it's true, then we'll show it. Let's go with that for now. But if I were saving it to the server, I would definitely add a 3rd state into here for like loading, and then whether it saved or whether it failed. But you know what? Let's just use a Boolean. So saved, set saved. Okay, here's where we're going to say local db dot add thanks, and you'll see that it's going to take a thanks create, and it'll return a promise of all the thanks. Okay, so add thanks and save thanks equals, and then we need to construct a save thanks here, which I don't have the type for. So we need to see if we can get that. Okay, I hit Command T to go somewhere in the project. It looks like it doesn't know where the save thanks is defined. I know where it is though. It's inside of local DB. Oh, thanks create is what it's called. So I could have gone there. Thanks create. Hey, there we go. And so this thing that I called thanks create, add thanks. I wonder what that whole tilde was about. That whole named argument. Well, a thanks create just has a description on it. So now we can go back to app and say what, this is not app. I'm not in app right now. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm clicking on the zoom window because I'm trying to make it go away so I can actually see what I'm doing. There we go, that's an app. So local db dot add thanks. Add thanks. Okay, so I'm going to comment this out so that the compiler can work again so I can get hints. Add thanks takes a thanks create. Yeah, I wonder where that whole thanks, save thanks thing came from. So I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to say that the field that we need is a description. And that description is, oh no, what is it going to be? Well, it's going to be the value of this field that we haven't set to anything yet. So let's just leave it like that. We're going to use some punning, and we'll have the value description bound. Okay, so let's do that down here. Let description and set description. We're going to have those bound, and the initial description is going to be an empty string. And okay, so add thanks is going to say, hey, I can't actually compile. Why? Add thanks, save thanks. It wants a thanks create, which we had, I thought. Local DB. Oh, you know what? We can just do this. Thanks create. Thanks create has a description, and that's a string. So I thought we could use some punning here, but maybe not. Okay. So this has type description. Oh, it thinks it's a JS object. That's strange. Why does it think it's a JS object? It wants a thanks create. Where's this whole save thanks thing coming from? Oh, you know what it is? It's saying that save thanks is a thing that it takes an argument and returns a JS object. Wow, that's really weird. Okay, so instead of that, let's just, this is how I would do it in JavaScript, but it's ending up weird here. So let's say let action save thanks. I'm going to prefix it with action so that it's easy to remember and autocomplete equals. Now let's try this. Yeah, that's a lot better. Okay, so that JS object thing was weird. I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so now we're going to say let %p. So that's going to go ahead and add the thanks. And then after we have saved it, after we have added the thanks, we can say set saved to be true. And then I'm going to, is there anything else I want to do? Thanks count. Maybe I want to reset the local thanks count state. Use state. Yeah, I might. Now, there is a way to have the state go ahead and let me know that something is updated by having our own custom hook. Let's see if we can remember how to do that. In fact, I may have already done it. Application provider, it's by using our own provider, which we don't seem to have done yet. So for now, let's do this. And we'll see that our state doesn't get updated. And then we'll go and actually update it soon. So we need to use set description and we need to use saved, okay? So down here, after the save button, let's add a view. Or actually, let's say based on saved, if it's saved, then we're going to pass in some text. Otherwise, we're going to pass in null or none. React.empty, I think is what it is, right? Okay, so text, and the text is going to be saved. Add another. Or like maybe add another. And that's going to be a React string. And okay, React.empty is not a thing. What is a thing? React.null? There we go, React.null. Okay, so this text, I want it to be some information text of some sort. So maybe like a success caption, a success caption 1. So the caption is of type category. Category equals, and I used to have autocomplete working for JSX and I don't anymore. Saved. Oh, tilde, get that out of there. Okay, category. Oh, it is working. I just keep putting tildes in, which is wrong. Duh. Okay, status is primary success. Is that a thing? It appears to be a thing. Okay, so now we've used saved. Let's use set description. Okay, so the input. Oh, what can we do here? On change text equals action. Oh, we don't have one yet. Action update description. Okay, so we could actually do it right in line, but I don't want to make our JSX too hard to read. So up here, I'm going to say let action update description equals, and then there's some value that comes in, new text, and I'm going to set that as description. Okay, so I'm going to say set description, new text. Now, you'll notice that all we're doing is calling set description. So we don't actually have to add an action there. We could just say set description. In fact, I think I will do that. There we go. So now when we type in, oh, there's nothing that's saving the things. Okay, so set description, save thanks. All right. Yep, on the button. That's when we want to set this. That's when we want to save the thanks right here. So the button, we're going to say appearance, disabled, key size, status. Looks like we haven't bound the value on the button yet for on press or on click. So let's go see React Native button API. Button. Title, color, disabled. On press, right there. On press. On press equals action save thanks. Now, what's it going to say? It can't, oh, it's because we haven't made a way inside of React Native UI Kitten for on press to be passed in. So let's go into UI Kitten and let's go to our, oh, we're in button right now, and we'll need to add on press. So on press is going to be a callback that takes unit and returns unit, essentially. More than essentially, actually. So we'll save it. And it is going to be optional, equals question mark. And now we should be able to save in here and see what happens. Oh, this returns a promise of unit. So action save thanks returns a promise of unit. Let's go up to action save thanks. And we see, oh, it returns a promise. So what do we need to do here? Here is a trick. We can go ahead and do this. And then instead of resolved here, yep. So we can actually go like this. We can call that promise. We can ignore the result of the promise. And then there you go. So what that does is that returns a unit. So inside of this block, that's going to be a promise right there. We're going to execute that promise, but we'll go ahead and ignore it at the end. Okay, so is everything, all of our hooks are used here, but I think what we're going to see is when we add thanks, we're not going to see the thanks count update, and that's what we'll have to fix next. So here we are. Let's say blah, 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 save. Oh, great. There's an runtime error. Okay. Undefined is not an object. That is not at all what I wanted to hear. So was it an add thanks? Is that where it crashed? Let's go see. Let's say js.log. I am in add thanks. Okay, simple as that. Let's compile it. Let's try it again. Okay, so we got through I am in add thanks. Okay, so can we load the database? js.log. I have loaded the database. Remember, I haven't tried this storage code at all yet. Okay. I have loaded the database. Okay, that's great. So what if I say js.log new thanks, and I say log2, and I pass in the new thanks. Okay, dismiss, save it, should reload. I have loaded the database. but it's not printing. It's not printing the new thanks. That doesn't make sense at all. Mute warnings, print exception. It's a promise exception. Thanks create. So what if we didn't do anything? Resolved. Thanks. Oh, okay. So new thanks is supposed to be a list of thanks. So we could go like this. Okay, so let's see if that helps us out. Reloading, typing a bunch of stuff, saving. Okay, it says it's loaded the database, but then it can't actually make any new thanks. So what if we say like js.log? What? And then instead of new thanks, we just return an empty array. Okay, so now I'm going to reload and I'm going to type some stuff. I'm going to hit save. Hey, so that's interesting. It looks like we couldn't build the new thanks. js.date CUID. Oh, you know what? Maybe it's the CUID problem. Let's see. What if we hard coded the ID to be just ID instead, right? Okay. And then we log out the new things. Is that going to work? Doop-a-doop. Hey, looks like CUID is giving us some issues. CUID.generate. Now, CUID is a library that I wrapped. So what's the issue here? It says bs.module external generate should take a unit and a string and return CUID. So CUID should be inside of package.json. CUID, it's right there. And this should be saying that when you call CUID, you just import it directly, and then you call the actual default import. But maybe, maybe it needs to be module CUID, and then maybe this needs to be default. Probably does, because we're not running an ES5 world, we're running an ES6. We're compiling to ES6. So there's my theory. Okay, hold on, we haven't, oh, we did add CUID back in. No, but it didn't compile. There, okay, let's try it again. Save. There we go. We fixed it. So if you get cryptic errors when you're working with Reason, it may be that you have bound an external module incorrectly. In fact, that's probably what it is. So now we can go and uncomment all of these things and resolve with the new thanks again and take out these logs. It's unfortunate that that promise error wasn't more helpful though, huh? Okay, so we write a bunch of stuff, save it, and then we write a bunch of more stuff and we save it. Okay. One thing we need to do when saving is clear the input field. And okay, so it looks like it may not actually be saving anything to the database either. So that's something to figure out. So storage.setState. I guess we never save, do we? We probably never save that database to disk. And that is something that we want to do. So loaded storage.load. Let's get rid of all these things that we don't need anymore. And let's go to storage. And look, there's the save function that we never call. Okay, so let's go back. And whenever we take an action, let's go ahead and see what we do here. What should we do here? Maybe we should make a function called like let db action equal, and that's going to take a promise, and maybe it's going to perform that promise. Let %p that equal p. So it just goes ahead and it does the promise. And then we're going to let %p again. And that's going to be storage.save. So we'll go ahead and save, and then we'll just say it's resolved with whatever the value of p is. Hey, okay. So that'll take any promise and go ahead and save afterward. So all of these things here, let's go ahead and call db action on them. And now, if we always make sure to call db action instead of add thanks, it'll commit to the db when the action is done. And that makes sure that anytime we're, well, okay, so we don't need to save the db after getting the thanks count, right? So maybe we only need to do maybe we should call this something that's like a write action. And then anytime we take a write action, the db is saved. And you want to know something cool? Instead of wrapping it in parens like this, you can delete those surrounding parens, and you can just use two @ symbols, and that will say anything that comes after me gets passed to me as my first argument, or as my single argument. Okie doke. So now we have the ability to actually save the database when we add things. Let's try it out. So we hit save. Our things don't update, but if we reload, boom, there they are. They have updated. So that's great. But how do we make those thanks update? That's kind of tricky. What we want to do is kind of have a global store where that everything can reference that will re-render our components when that store changes. I mean, we could just go into our view and say, hey, you know, every time I add thanks, I want to re-update that thanks count by fetching it from the database again. But there are many cases in applications where there's something like, let's say you're making a journaling application, which is what I do for a living, and you want all of the, like, you have journals, and like all of your app is based around journals, and you want to load them into one place in memory and have everything read off of them. That kind of makes sense to me, to have one place where those journals are stored and all views read from them and reload when those are changed. So there is a library called state. Let's see, React state. What's it called? Unstated, I think it's called. Yeah, unstated next. So this is pretty clever, actually. It's so simple it goes without saying. And because all it's doing is combining React context with React state. So let's see, there's the next version. Okay, here we go. Okay. So you can see here that they have this create container, and so they have a function called use counter. And this is going to be like their own global state. Well, I say global state, but it's the state that multiple views reference without using props, okay? So the initial state comes in when they say use counter, it passes in the initial state. And then inside of here, they use the state hook. And then they make some actions that can be taken on that state. And then they go ahead and they return the state and the actions that can be taken on it. And then they create a counter for it. And let's see, or I'm sorry, they create a container using unstated next. And so function counter display counter.use container. Use container gives you back counter. And then here is where counter can be unpacked to have count, decrement, and increment. Now I don't know what happened with the initial state. Oh, initial state, I guess they've preset it to always equal 0. I don't think you actually have to take an initial state there, and they're obviously not using it. I don't know where you would pass that in. Probably you'd call use counter or something. I don't know. But the idea is this now has created a provider, and that provider, or I'm sorry, has created a container that uses the use context hook. And so it provides a provider for you. And okay, so they have counter. This is really a complex example, but they're showing that you can use multiple contexts to have different states. Like you'd have a different counter outside than you would inside, right? But in our app, we would only use a provider once, and then wherever any children of this provider could have the same state injected whenever they say use container. So we can actually do this without unstated at all. So let's see if we can just go ahead and do that. It's been a bit for me though. So okay, so we're gonna say my brain isn't working, so it's late at night and I've been programming all day. So I'm just gonna throw some whatever in there, and we'll say react.use context. Okay, and context is going to take something and expose it to everyone. So I think what we're going to do for use context is we're going to pass in some state and then a function to update the state, essentially. So like state, set state. Okay, hold on. See what they do. I'm trying to remember. Create container, use hook, container provider initial state, use container. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Maybe they're doing it here. Use counter. Yeah, here we go. This is what they're doing. Let's see. This is great. Perfect. Sometimes we need a little more structure. The create container function. Okay. Yep, that's like a container. So here's what's going on under the hood. So they create this function that uses use state inside of it, and then they use create context from React. They create this counter container, and then they say counter equals use context counter, and then they have a counter provider, and the value is, yeah, there we go. Woo, that took a minute. Inside of their outer component, they go ahead and they call use counter, and this wraps up both the state and the functions to set the state, and then that is what goes on the context. So the thing that goes on the context is both the state and the thing that sets the state. So in this case, use context would we'd have a function that would return basically our entire database, right? So let's say let use DB or use local DB. And that's just, I'm not going to give it an initial value. It just is what it is, okay? And that's going to say let DB mem, like the DB memory and this is actually good. Set DB mem to equal use state base.use state, and the initial state is going to be the DB memory. I think we've already got an initial state somewhere loaded. I think it's going to be storage dot something. Guess what? My keyboard just stopped working. This happens sometimes. This is my super expensive Kinesis that just stops working. Plugging it, trying it again. Sometimes I just have to keyboard mash on it for a while until it starts working again. Woo, still keyboard mashing. Come on, Kinesis. Anything? Nothing. Its lights aren't on either. Well, that's crummy. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording while I try to fix this. All right, we're back in business. Okay. So we were just saying, okay, yep, use state, and then we were going to say storage dot state, get state, unit gives you back state. Sure, there's the initial state, I think. Yeah, it gives me back a state. That's the initial state. Okay, so here is our initial state. Now, this is the memory representation of the state. Now, we don't need to be loading from disk all the time. The only time we need to load from disk is on start. So here we can say, we can go ahead and say storage.load. And that's going to return a promise. So we can say repromise.map. I'm not going to use a let here because I don't want everything that's following this to have to depend on this promise finishing before it becomes available. So repromise.map from DB, and then we say set DB mem from DB. Okay, so that this has type. Repromise.map probably takes, yep. So I used a fast pipe and we want a slow pipe. Okay. Now this is going to say what? This expression has type, a promise, and it wants a unit, I think. So then we say ignore so that it doesn't get upset with us. Oh, set DB mem. Repromise.map. Okay, let's go look. I can't read the hovers very well. This has type, a promise of storage.state, but it wanted a promise of unit. So set DB mem. Let's see, repromise.map. Set DB mem is going to return unit, I thought. Storage.state. Okay. This has type storage of state. Repromise.promise. Okay. So a load is going to return a promise of unit. Oh, storage.load does not return the state. Interesting. Okay. So, so this does not actually work. What we do need to do is call get state again, because now that we've loaded it up into memory, we need to say get state set dbmem storage.getState. There you go. There we go. Okay, so that looks a lot better. Load the storage from disk and drop it in memory. Memory. Okay, and now that's done, we can go ahead and make our actions in here. So these actions right here that used to write and return promises, they are not going to do that anymore. They are now going to just work directly on the end memory store. Okay, so write action used to take a promise. Now I'm going to make it so that it doesn't take a promise. Well, okay, some of these will be promises. Nope, no, they won't. Write action will now not be a promise for A. So we're going to get rid of that load and going to get rid of that state right there. And we're going to take this thing and we're going to put it down in here. Okay. So this is actually going to be state and set state. How about that? State and set state. Okay. Great. And so this is going to be set state. Great. So storage, yep. Okay, add thanks, write action. And write action is going to save. Yeah, good. So write action. And it's going to say what? What's the matter here? promise, rejectable. Okay, we got some interesting stuff in here. So the add thanks, I'm actually going to change it so that it doesn't return anything. It's just going to return unit. Okay, let's see what happens if we do that. Or maybe we could do it. Yeah, it's going to return a promise of unit. Okay, let's just do that. And write action, new thanks storage dot. Okay, new thanks state dot thanks storage dot set state. Okay, this is where we want to do just set state. Set state thanks is new thanks, and then let's just call, yep, great. So we're not doing anything promisey in here. Okay, so add thanks is there. And the nice thing is that we are doing the right action. So instead of returning a promise of unit, let's just return unit from this. And right action, instead of awaiting this, we'll just call it so that happens asynchronously, and it'll ignore, and then it'll resolve. Great. So now what? Now what's the issue? Okay, it's saying that it's still a promise. Right action, let A equals P. Because we're doing resolved. Okay. So basically what we could really do is we could just say P. Or actually, instead of P, because that would insinuate it's a promise, let's just call this A, right? Great, easy, simple. Okay, so add thanks is available. And now let's make let get thanks count. Let's add that in there. Get thanks count right there. And it's going to return not a promise. It's just going to return int. And state is storage.getState. Nope, we don't even need that. State.thanks list.length. Just going to return the count. Great. So this is all working in memory. Now what we can do is we can return some tuples here if we want to, or we can return a record, but it's not going to know what type of record we're returning. So we could do an object that has, can we pattern match on an object? Maybe. State. Let's just see. Instead of returning state, we're going to return add thanks and add thanks. You know what? Maybe we should just make a type for the local DB, right? So type local DB equals, and then we'll say that the first field is add thanks, and that's going to take a thanks create, and it's going to return unit. That's simple. And then we're going to say get thanks count, and that's going to take a unit, and it's going to return an int. So simple. And then down here, use local DB is going to return a local DB. Whoa. And then it's like, hey, you got to actually pass in the right stuff. And so I'm like, okay, add thanks and get thanks count. Boom. It's amazing. Okay. So now, simply enough, instead of installing their library, we can go and just read right off their source code to remind us what on earth we're doing. Keeping getting small tips, composing, okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so what they do is they have use counter, and then they create basically they just create a context with nothing in it. And then counter display uses the context. So counter display says use context counter. Use context, and it passes in this context, right? Yeah, that's right. And then the parent has use counter, and then they pass in the provider right there. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is we'll make our own thing here, which is like module, or actually, since we already have a module called local DB, let's say this function is going to be, this is okay, use context counter. That's funny. So use local DB, I think this is going to be more like init local DB, right? And then down here, we'll say let provider or local DB context equals react.use context. Use context, and that's just going to be none, essentially, right? Oh, that shouldn't be an uppercase L. And use context is going to take, oh, it wants, what? What does it want? It wants a context of any. So what's a context? Oh, context type T. Oh, you know what? We don't want use context. We want context. Create context. That's what we want. Create context of type none. Okay. Oh, that should have worked. Oh, it contains type variables that cannot be generalized. Of course it does. Because we need an initial local DB, I guess. This is annoying. Use context. Use counter, values counter. Okay. So let's you know what? I think if we actually install their library, it is going to clean things up a bit, because we could totally do this without them, but let's just add it. I think it'll make it a little cleaner. So let's say npm install -- save dev. There's a lib. Oh, of course. Here's the library. We don't want to save dev. We just want to save it. And then we'll add our own wrappings. And the only things that they expose are create container. And create container is going to take this use counter function, essentially. Okay, so let's say unstated dot re source. Yeah, let's just do that. And we'll say at bs dot module. And you'll see that their create container is a named import. So we'll put the module right here, bs.module unstated next. External create container. Oops, container equals, oh, not equals. This is the type. Okay, so when you call create container, you want to pass in a function that takes A and returns B, essentially. A to B, and then it's going to return a provider, I believe. It's going to return a context, because you'll get counter display, use container, counter dot, yep, you'll get a thing that has use container on it, and you'll have a provider as well. Woo. Okay, so let's see if we can figure this out. This is going to have a type T, okay? And type T is going to have a thing that's, this is a JS object, and it's going to have a use container on it. And use container is going to take unit, and it's going to return a B, T of B, right? Or does it take, I think use container might take A. Use container and you pass in use container. Okay. Yeah. So if you pass in A to use container, then you're going to get back a B. And type A is initial and B is state. And so initial, and this is more like state with actions, right? Great. And not only use container, but also provider. And that's it's gonna be of type react.context.t. Great. So this, given an A to B, will produce a T of A, B. That looks right to me. What's this problem? Oh, react.context.t of state with actions. Now, I probably have this wrong, but we'll see. Okay. So bs.module, great, equals create container. Okay. All right. Now, if I bound that correctly, then we should be able to call create container inside of local DB, and that should create a DB container. Then that container, we should be able to call DB container # use container instead of my actual function, and we should be able to use the provider out in the app. So let's try that out. Okay, so instead of init local DB, this is going to be called use local DB to follow their advice, and this will be the let local DB container equals unstated dot create container. It's not auto completing yet for me. Create container use local DB. So far my type checks are passing. Okay, great. And then I'm going to go into app.re, and inside of here, local db.add thanks. Yeah, okay. Here's where we're. Okay, this is interesting. So now we have like the app, which is the root component, and we also have our providers here at the same time. I don't know if you can use, when I use the container, I want the provider to already be existing and wrapping. So this is my app component. I'm going to say, instead of app, I'm going to start putting things inside of, this is my main screen. Main screen.re, okay? So most of my stuff is going to happen in there. So I'll say at react.component, let, what's it called? Make, I think. No, it's just called whatever. Right? I'm going to call it make, I think. I think that makes more sense. I don't remember exactly what the rules are here, but I think make is the way to go. Because otherwise, I don't know that the PBX works well. I kind of wonder if that's why hot reloading is breaking on me, because that's not called make. Let's see. Reason React docs. Reason React. Get started. And let's see. JSX version 3. Capitalized. Yeah, you make a module, and it's supposed to be called make. It's supposed to have a module with a function called make in it. So what if we change this to make, and then we, inside of app.js, we call export make as default. You know, it needs to be called app, I think, but let's just see if that works, okay? So we're going to save that here inside of main screen. Okay, so all of these hooks, all of these things that I've set up, and the action thanks and the on mount, all that's going to go inside of main screen. Okay, and then the application provider is fine, but everything else inside of the application provider is going to go inside of the other file. Okay, and this application provider is going to have main screen in it. Great. Main screen is throwing, it says, hey, make isn't defined inside of main screen. It actually is. I think we might need to like kick our compiler a little bit. Oh yeah, it's not defined because it can't find P. So we got to open base. And great, there we go. Okay, yeah, we got some stuff to face here. Okay, so there are styles. And there's a comment with it. Boop, 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 boop. Okay. And we got to open Reason React. Yeah, I think so. No, React Native. Open React Native. And UI Kitten. Yep. Okay. Great. Stuff's starting to look good in here. So now inside of here, we have our application provider. And now we're also going to use our local DB dot. Actually, we're not going to be able to use emmet on this because it has dots in it. Local DB dot, what was it called? Local DB container. Local DB container dot provider. Not dot, hash hash. Hash hash provider. And close all of that. Boop. Wow, that can't actually be done, unfortunately. I've never done, I did this in TypeScript, but I haven't done it in React before. So that's interesting. Let's see. That probably means that inside of here, we have to say module container equals this, module provider equals this, and at let make maybe equals, oh, no. Okay, let's go look at the interop docs. Come on, let me look at them. Talk to existing React.js code. For the newest features, migrating function components. Okay, at react.component. Note on children. Hooks, handwriting, interop, export to JS, import from JS. Okay. bs.module, path to component. Okay, we're going to make this a little, these bindings are going to be a little better, all right? Yes, I think they are. Okay, so we're going to go into unstated, and this type T is going to be opaque, I believe. Type T, I mean, I think it can have parameters, but it's not going to have an implementation. Okay, so I mean, I could have use container on it. That's fine. So yeah, we could do that. So let's leave use container on there, but the provider part, that's coming off. Okay, so this is where we say at bs dot, oh man, this is hard. how did we do this before? Because it's like given a T, we have to return a React component, right? Given a T, we have to return something that builds a React component. So at bs.module unstated next, actually, this is like more like at bs.send external T of initial N of AB. Given those, oh, actually, this is, sorry, provider. Yeah, see, this is difficult because the way we do the bindings, in React is that, you know, maybe we should look at the context source code and how context does this in Reason React. Context right here. Context provider, create context, make props, let make equals react.context.provider theme context, right? Okay, so create the context with the string light, make props, make. It's almost like it returns a module, but that would be pretty difficult to figure out. Okay, so let's see. You can use context provider, value light. Okay, so if we were to use the library, the context itself, the provider, context. So you need the context, and then you need the provider. So this is how they're making the provider. They're saying let make is react.context.provider. Oh, they have a function. You know what? I think I'm going to abandon unstated again because I think I'm getting this better now. Because local DB is a function that will return a local DB. So if we were to call this use local DB, we would use the context would return the function to us that we could call. Right? So my real question here is this use state thing. Because when the state changes, we want to trigger a change in the context. As the night gets later, my brain stops working as well. Okay, I'm gonna pause the video and just think for a bit. All right. I had a minute to think. I think we're gonna try going without unstated again, because the problem with unstated is that React's JSX bindings expect you to have a module for a React component, and the JSX, well, it's just not possible to call a function that returns an object with a module on it, at least according to my knowledge. I don't think that the type system can represent that. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to do it by hand again. And what we'll do here is we'll call, so use local DB, we'll return a local DB, and then we'll create a context that, following these instructions right here in context and mixins, a context that will provide that to any children. So let's say let local DB context equal, or actually just context because we're already inside the local DB module. So let context equal react dot create context, and Create context. So they want an initial value for this, and I'm going to do something not amazing, which is we're pretty much never going to use this initial value, because we're going to make sure that we pass in a value when we instantiate the provider. And so when you create the context, they just want an initial value because if there are no providers, then it falls back to the initial value. So I'm going to say object.magic js.null. And let's see what that gives us. The old type variables cannot be generalized thing. Okay. So it's gonna be upset because it wants an initial implementation of this. So maybe we'll say let dummy db equals this. We say add thanks, and it's gonna take something and return nothing, and get thanks count. It's gonna take nothing, and it's going to return 0. Okay, so that's just our default, our dummy DB implementation. And we're going to pass that in right there just to appease the type system. Okay, and great. We could have been like, I think another way we could do that is we could say let dummy DB of type local DB equals obj.magic none, and that would be like at runtime that would be undefined, and that still works. So maybe that'll save us a little bit of pain. Okay, so I can only do that because I know the runtime rules. This is dangerous. Make sure we pass in an actual local DB implementation when the context is when the provider is used, because that is a good place for runtime bugs to sneak in. So we've got our local DB there. Okay, and now that we've got our context, we have to make the provider. So we'll say let make props equal value children nothing, and then so this pattern is what the new JSX PBXs use. So we're just meeting the requirements for the PBX essentially. So let make equal react.context.provider of theme context, and that's actually going to be our just context. Okay, and make props is going to return an object with value that matches value and children that matches children. So now I think we should be able to use it. So let's go all the way back to app. And inside of here, this is where we could say local DB dot provider local DB dot. I think I need to make a module inside of local DB called provider right here. Whoops. Provider equals that. Just typing too quickly for my own good. Okay, there we go. So now there we go. Now we can pass local db.provider, and value equals local db dot use value is local db, and up here this is where we say let local db equals local db.use local db. Boom. Ha 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 ha. now that that's done, we can go into main screen. Okay, so we got some compiler errors in here. So now instead of local db.add thanks, we say let local d yeah. So the local db has some fields on it, right? Like add thanks and get thanks count. Get thanks count equals react.use context and local db dot context. Now it should be saying local db dot add thanks. Hey, check that out. Now we have a type checked context that we can use. So add thanks. Now we don't, this isn't a promise anymore. So we just add the thanks. We set the saved to true. We don't need to do a promise. Remember that? That's nice. Boom, that's nice. That's nice. Okay, so the count will always flash 0 at the beginning when we're loading up, I think. But, you know, we can fix that some other time. So count is there. We get the thanks count. We don't need to call local DB. Great. Thank you. String. It doesn't. Oh, I need to open React. Open React. Wow. That was all of our errors. They're gone. The whole thing compiled. Okay, so let's try this out now. Let's go to our simulator. Reload. Hey, things are looking pretty good. Not that good though. Doesn't appear to be updating. So now let's go ahead and go into our local DB, right? And we're gonna say thanks create. Okay, so let's do something like add thanks right action. So it'll be like log.log or js.log adding thanks. Now make sure these functions are actually getting called, right? Oh, you know what? In our main screen, we're not even using the right state. See that thanks count right there? Let's get rid of that. Because we can get that thanks count from right here. Get thanks count, right? So this is going to say get thanks count. Now theoretically, oh, look at that. You have 1 thanks recorded so far. So we're trying to add thanks and it's not updating. It's not updating the database. Now, why do we think that would be? Let's see. Inside of our local DB, we should be setting the state whenever we get new thanks, right? So set state, thanks, new thanks. And storage.load. I wonder if it has to do with that storage.load right there. Yeah, check that out. Okay, so the problem was we only want to load it from the storage on initial instantiation. So up here is probably where we want to say from storage promise, okay? So that's where we'll say instead of asking it to load from storage, the caller will ask it to load from storage. So, and that will only happen once from storage promise, because this use local DB is going to get called every time the view runs. So that's what we'll do. So we'll await the promise that gets passed in, and then we'll do all this other stuff, okay? And so in the app out here, we need to pass in that promise. And so this is where we say use or base.onMount. Okay, and this is, we're going to have to construct a promise ref on the outside. Let's see, is that what we're going to do? How are we going to do this properly? use local DB, because we'll want to, oh, you know what? We just want to do it once when the app runs, right? So let's say let local DB promise equals storage load, and then we'll pass in the local DB promise there. Now, what's its problem? It wants a thing that it can call, I think. From storage promise, yes. So we go back, all of a sudden, everything is beautiful. Things are working. Okay, adding some more thanks. Now, interestingly, that's not updating because it's awaiting that promise every time. Okay, so so it's awaiting the promise every time. Use local DB is awaiting that promise. Okay, and then it's setting the value of the result of the promise. So what do we do about that? Thanks count. When do we how do we bootstrap this properly? The initial value, set it in. So one thing we could do is, instead of keeping state in memory, instead of using set state here, we could make it so that, yeah, no, this is weird. What do we do here? We want to load. Loaded equals storage.load. Get rid of that. And use local DB. We're probably actually going to do something crazy out here. And I'm actually going to bring that back. I'm gonna do this thing again. Okay, so that's loaded, and I'm gonna get rid of this, get rid of that thing that was passed in. I'm gonna await that, but only if the already loaded ref is done. So let already loaded equals ref. Now that's a language ref, not like a React ref. So React ref false. This is a mutable variable. Okay, so I'm gonna say if not already loaded, and we use a caret symbol to get the value out of that ref, then we want to go ahead and do that thing. And loaded repromise.map set state and ignore, and then we also want to say already loaded colon equal true. So that means that we only load it from disk one time, and every time after, we're just working in memory. Now that should be writing to disk as well, because we say set state, and then we do the write action, and the write action, oh, you know what? We never, yeah, we set state, but we never set the storage, right? So when we do set state, now that's actually pretty interesting, because we should say set state, and then we should make a thing that says set state right here. Let set state, and that's going to be equal state. So what we got to do here is first we got to set the state, and then we got to say storage dot set state, and then we're going to say storage dot save. I like that even better. That's even better. Yes. And then we get rid of this write action thing, right? So automatically, whenever we modify the state, it's just going to work. It's just going to save it to disk. All right, here we go. Let's add something else. Save it, reload the app. Hey, now we're working. Now we're cooking on all cylinders. All right, let's go ahead and clear in the main screen. When we hit save, let's clear the contents. So let's find that save action or action save. Action save. No, what do we call it? Set saved. Yeah. Set saved. Action save. Thanks. Yeah, I wonder why that didn't come up in my symbol autocomplete. Oh, okay. Probably because it's inside of a function. I wonder if it doesn't find functions inside of functions. Well, the language server is definitely a work in progress. So I'm going to add thanks. And first, let me turn off my, okay, we're good. I'm going to say actions save things, set saved true. And now we will say set description to be an empty string again. Simple as that. Ready? 4 thanks recorded so far, blah, blah. Oh, you know why it didn't work? It's because description is not being used as the value of the input. So if we say value equals description, we should be okay, except we haven't added value to input yet. So we can't actually command click on that because the reason language server doesn't understand that yet. There's a lot of work to do on the reason language server. If you're interested, let me know. And let's go down to button. Value is a string. It's an optional string. And that should clear up, right? Oh, did we put it on button or something? Yeah, we did. That was dumb. Let's go to input right here. Boop. There we go. And now they've got a bug for us instead of app. What's that? Oh, the local DB promise. We don't need that anymore. Hey, there we go. Now things are working again. So add another one. Great, it clears up. Look at all those thanks. So I may be like, thanks to her. Everyone who was watching made me feel good. Great. So that's the main interface to the app. And then I think what we'll do is make a button right here that's like view the thanks. And then you can go over, we'll get started on this tomorrow or something. Then you'll go over to the next view and you'll be able to actually view them. So let me show you, since we're about to wrap up for the night, how to go ahead and get something like this published. So I know it's really difficult. Expo Publish. That's how hard it is. It's going to bundle. It's going to make the iOS bundle. So what this does is this isn't going to publish to the App Store. This is going to publish to Expo's CDN. And their CDN is going to, I'm going to be able to use the Expo app to load up this app whenever I want, even if I don't have the development server running. If I wanted to actually get a real build on my phone, then there's a whole nother process where I have to be registered with an Apple developer ID, and I have to be able to push up to my account, and it does a build, and it pushes up an actual build of my app with the resources in them and puts them over on TestFlight. It's actually really smooth and heavily automated, but this is a great way to put up on the server something that I can use in the Expo app when I'm not developing, but when I'm just playing with the app. Unfortunately, you can't share it with other iOS users, but you can share it with other Android users, at least on the free plan. They made it, I believe, so that you cannot share Expo apps to other Expo users on the free plan on iOS, which is what I'm on. Okie doke. Oh, possible memory leak detected. You can see that it's uploading the bundles here. So I won't make you watch all of this, but there you go. exp.host/my username/thank you. It's got an app up there that I can then install, not install on my phone, but I can open on my phone. And if you have an Android app, you can just go ahead and use that in your Expo client at home. All right. Thank you for joining me, everyone. Thanks for joining me tonight, and tune in for next time.